hits all the time.
We are family.
Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Klaff. If you are tuned in with us live on YouTube and Facebook, you can see behind us that we have a whiteboard, which means it's a fantasy draft episode, which we will get to in a minute. But Annie, we of course have to start with our rec soccer team, Atletico Madrid. Our season cut short in round one of the playoffs. I normally say after a loss by Atletico Madrid that it was a pathetico performance. I don't think this was. This was a gritty, tough performance from Atletico Madrid. We had 0 substitutions for the entire game. The other team had 4. And this was a 1-goal game pretty deep into the second half. So I'm proud of Atletico's performance. It wasn't pathetico one bit.
Yeah, it was a good matchup. The other team was good. I'll give it to them. They had some really tough physical players, and it definitely got a little bit chippy at the end.
A bit.
But no, it was good. I did not score, unfortunately. I was really gunning for it.
You had some chances.
I did sky it a few times over the net.
Oh, it happens to the best of us.
That's all right. Our teammate Austin and friend of the pod had a stinger of a goal.
That was a banger.
That was a good goal.
That was a banger. We were within 1 deep into the game. I'm proud of our performance, but our season still ultimately cut short.
Yeah,
but we've got a lot to get to today, Annie. This is a fantasy draft episode. If you were with us throughout the offseason, we do a couple of fantasy drafts. The fantasy draft, about a month ago at this point, with friend of the program, Tim Leonard, was fantasy drafting the all-modern era Orioles. So that was a bunch of guys from the last 15 years at this point. This draft is just going to be drafting players from the 2025 iteration of the Orioles. So we are essentially doing like a fantasy football or a fantasy baseball draft where you are selecting players that you think are going to be contributors in the 2025 season. We did this same draft last year. Let's take a look at the teams from last year. I think I had a pretty solid squad. This was myself and Matt Bonaparte doing this fantasy draft. We'll start with my team. 3 All-Stars in Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westberg, and Anthony Santander. I did win the WAR battle. I guess you could just say I won the WAR. 20.5, the total WAR for my team here. Had some nice contributors elsewhere as well. Jackson Holiday came up, had a nice season. Ryan O'Hearn had a 2 WAR season. James McCann, the backup catcher there with a nice year as well. My starters, John Means and Kyle Bradish, did not pitch as deep into the season as I would have liked, but I think it's a well-rounded squad here. My outfield could definitely use some work, but Santander in right field, it still keeps them afloat a little bit.
Yeah, 2 out of the 3 of your outfielders are a little bit non-contributing.
Sure, questionable, but I think my infield makes up for it.
Yeah, infield definitely makes up for it. Starting pitcher number 1, Grayson Rodriguez, was really, really good up until his injury, so definitely Gunnar brings up your team a lot.
He certainly does. When you have a player that has 9+ WAR, that's going to keep your team afloat a little bit.
It's foreshadowing.
Yes. Let's move to Bones here. He is not here to defend himself or his team.
I will defend him for
him.
He
has pretty much the opposite team that I have, where his infield could definitely use some work. There's still some contributors there in Ryan Mountcastle and Ramon Arias. His outfield was outstanding. Of course, Austin Hayes dealt at the deadline, so you don't get a full season of his contributions, but Cedric Mullins, Colton Cowser, both with nice seasons. He's, of course, got 2 All-Stars in Corbin Burns and Adley Rutschman. That's a nice battery there.
Yeah, Ramon Arias, kind of a sneaky 9 WAR for his career with the Orioles, and he was a big contributor last year towards the end after his injury and then even beforehand with the injury. Kobe Mayo, unfortunately, did not become as much of a contributor as you would have hoped at the beginning of the season, and it'll kind of sound like the same conversation that we're going to have today probably. Jorge Mateo, again, lots of injuries in this infield, which is too bad.
Yeah, the bullpen the same way. Danny Coulomb and Dylan Tate, you're not getting much production there. Tyler Wells, A lot of injuries here for Bones' team. That's the way this fantasy draft is going to go, unfortunately. You are trying to predict what these guys are going to do this season. And, of course, there's going to be injuries. And the Orioles were hit with a massive injury bug last year, which weighed down Matt's team a bit. Still a total WAR of 16.9. Still a nice team. But the separator, of course, being the fact that I had Gunnar Henderson, who had a really, really good season last year, had a fourth-place MVP finish and a WAR of 9.1, according to Baseball Reference. So that's really the difference in our two teams. I think we know that Gunnar is probably going to be the first overall selection in this draft leading into 2025, but we don't know who's going to have the first overall pick yet. So let's get right into it, Annie.
This is the part I'm
We
most
have our
nervous
big
for.
boards. We've done our research. Annie, you have the coin.
I have the coin. Quarter.
Whoever...
Crossing the Delaware.
Yes, I think we've decided that whoever wins this coin toss will get the number 1 overall pick. We were going back and forth on whether that coin toss victor would get to choose their pick or get number 1, but I think we're both probably picking number 1 if we win the coin toss. So do you want to call it in the air?
No,
or am I calling it in the air?
You'll call it.
All right.
I need to focus
This
on
is why you need to
catching
tune in live on YouTube and Facebook. You are getting the drama of a live coin toss here from Annie Klaff. Will she flick it into the next room and we won't be able to see who wins the draft? Here we go. Okay. Annie.
Ready?
You have the floor. Tails for me.
It is tails.
Oh, it is tails, which means I get the first overall
Crossing
pick.
the Delaware.
And yeah, the crossing the Delaware quarter was in my favor. I have crossed the Delaware first, and I will be selecting Gunnar Henderson. Look, there's no surprise here. This was a top 5 MVP finisher from a season ago. He is a 5-tool player. He was an all-star. There's really no other way that I could go other than a player that seems to be a perennial MVP candidate. So with the number 1 overall pick, this is, of course, a snake draft. So you will have numbers 2 and 3. You have the chance to select a couple of more all-stars if you want to. But starting my team with Gunnar Henderson is a very good jumping-off point.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be a no-brainer of who takes the first overall pick. I mean, you mentioned his WAR just in last season at 9.1 Baseball Reference WAR in one season is incredible. All-star, of course, and definitely just the potential that he has even moving forward. It is a little bit iffy when you look at how he's done in the spring. You can't really base anything off of it because of this intercostal strain. But regardless, he's probably going to be back soon enough, knock on wood, and he will be a major contributor coming up.
Can't say I'm too worried about Gunnar Henderson's spring numbers. I think he is probably going to be fine. So, Annie, you now have back-to-back picks in this snake draft.
I'm not upset about having back-to-back picks.
No, nor should you be.
Let's go back to our 2010 to now fantasy draft with Tim Leonard and you, and I did not have any back-to-back picks, so this is fun.
Yeah.
But I think with the next pick, I'm going to go with Adley Rutschman. I just think that is the also no-brainer for the number 1 and number 2 picks for this draft. A 13.1 overall WAR with the O's, 5-point WAR in his rookie season, followed by 4.3, and then last year was a little bit down at 3.4 comparatively, but still the spring that he's had and those offensive numbers that he's put up this spring, I mean, you try not to put too much stock in spring training numbers, but what he's shown so far is insane, an OPS of above 1,000, so I'm happy with getting Adley on my team.
He looks locked and loaded in spring training. And, for somebody like Gunnar Henderson, as we mentioned, I'm not going to read too much into his spring training numbers, but I think you can a bit read into what Adley Rutschman has been doing.
Yeah.
Teammates have been raving about his work ethic so far this spring. Brandon Hyde said that he came to camp absolutely locked in. He looked better physically. He had done a lot of work on both sides of the ball in the offseason. So I am buying the Adley Rutschman hype this offseason, and I think that's the obvious number 2 pick there.
Me as well. And then with my second pick, to me this is the ultimate third best overall, but I don't know if you can disagree with that, but I'm going to go with Felix Bautista as my third.
Wow, okay.
As my second pick. Just because I don't want him to be in your bullpen. I know that there is some question marks on how he's going to come back and what he will be able to perform and if he can get back to those 2023 numbers, his all-star season. But I definitely don't want him on your team.
I think that's a fair way to keep him off my team. I will say I don't know if I would have selected him with my next two picks solely because we don't know exactly what he is going to be upon his return. But if Felix is pitching like Felix, you've just selected one of the most dominant relievers in all of baseball, one of the most dominant pitchers, period. So you are drafting Felix Bautista at his ultimate upside, and I don't think that's a bad selection by any means. It's just risky. One that carries some risk, absolutely, given the injury that Felix Bautista is attempting to come back from here. With back-to-back picks here, though, I feel like I'm in a good spot with what I'm able to do. I could go to the pitching well to make sure that you don't draft back-to-back starting pitchers, which you could absolutely do and box me out of pitching here a little bit. But I'm going to go in a different direction, and I think I'm going to take two position players. And those position players are going to be Jordan Westburg and Colton Cowser. Jordan Westburg makes the All-Star team last year, had a 2.5 WAR despite missing, 50 games last season. You could feel his absence last year being one of the most clutch hitters on this team. He is Mr. Reliable. He is Mr. Steady. He can play a few different positions for me here, third base and second base both being an option. But I think for now I'm going to put him at third base. And then Colton Cowser I'm going to put in center field. Colton Cowser, I think, has as much upside as just about anybody on this team. This is a potential 5-tool player. And if I'm looking at this draft from a WAR perspective, which is how we measured the two teams from last year, I'm not saying that's everything, but Colton Cowser could be a 25 homer, 25 stolen base type of guy. He could be a cleanup hitter. He could be your leadoff hitter. I think we will continue to see a year two leap from Colton Cowser here. He was a fantastic rookie, could have won Rookie of the Year, could have won Gold Glove in left field. So if it's a 25 homer, 25 stolen base Gold Glove caliber season from Colton Cowser, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all. So I am happy to get that position player duo with my next two picks here.
Yeah, those are definitely two ones that I will be missing for sure on my team, just given what they've done offensively and defensively. I mean, Cowser, 96th percentile in outs above average last year and arm strength. He was definitely... you could argue robbed of AL Rookie of the Year. It was definitely a tight race for that last season. But like you said, Jordan Westburg was sorely missed when he was injured, just especially what he's able to do when he's at the plate with runners in scoring positions. So I am certainly upset that you have both of them, but I guess I did that to myself by picking Felix early on, but
it's a high upside selection, and we'll see how Felix is out of the gate. If he comes back and is the same dominant Felix, then that's a slam dunk number 3 pick there.
Let's see. Okay, for my next two picks, I'm going to, let's see here.
Also, shout out to Noah on Facebook pointing out that we are actually live at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday.
True.
This is a big moment for us, and thank you for acknowledging that, Noah.
Yes, thank you very much. Sometimes we do things right. Okay, so I think with my next pick, I will dip into the pitching category again, but I'm going to go for starter. This one I think you could toss up between the current opening day starter, but also someone who is starting on the injured list come opening day. But I think I'm going to go with the information that we have now. I'm going to go with Zach Eflin as my starting pitcher number 1. Came in at the trade deadline last year and delivered everything that the Orioles needed. When there was such an influx of starting rotation injuries, Zach Eflin came in and got the job done. Obviously, elite command, so I'm looking forward to having that on my team. A 1.8 WAR in only half of a season is pretty decent for a pitcher. And then obviously a 2.60 ERA last season in just 55 and 1/3 innings pitched, but the walk rate is just absurd.
Yeah, as we currently sit 8 days out from the regular season, we don't have as much information as we would like on Grayson Rodriguez. And Zach Eflin is going to be the opening day starter, and you know that you are going to get a really solid contributor in the starting rotation. We hope that everything is okay for Grayson Rodriguez and that his time on the injured list is minimal, but we know what Zach Eflin is going to give you, as I said. So I think that's the smart selection there. If both these guys were healthy, it's still a toss-up because Zach Eflin in years past has been a top Cy Young finisher, hasn't won the award, but he's been up there. So I think this is the right pick given the information that we have on those two guys.
All right, and then my next one, I could go back-to-back starting pitchers.
You certainly could.
I don't think I'm going to because I need some position players early on.
Because if you go back-to-back starting pitchers here, this is the chess match here of these fantasy drafts. If you go back-to-back starting pitchers, I'm not going to go starting pitcher. I'm just going to keep taking position players and totally box you out.
So I think I am going to go with Jackson Holliday as at second base because even though he really did not have a fantastic season last year, I want to throw that out the window because I think that there's still a lot of potential for Holliday to come in first full season.
Now, do you want Jackson Holliday at second base or shortstop? Given that he might be the backup shortstop on this team behind Gunnar Henderson.
That is totally true. But
we could put him at second for now and then move him if necessary.
Yeah, second for now. And I really don't want to pay attention to his numbers last season because it was still his first full stint in the big leagues, or first lengthy stint. But this one coming up, he's definitely going to have a lot less pressure. He's going to be able to prove himself more, feel more comfortable. He's worked on the toe tap in the off season, and I think that that's going to help a lot for his plate approach and his swing moving forward. And I think I'm happy with having Holliday moving forward.
Yeah, this is an upside play. Much like Felix Bautista, you have now selected 2 of your 4 players that could have absolutely monster 2025s. We have seen really good things from Jackson Holliday at the plate in spring training. We saw flashes of it last season, but he worked his butt off in the offseason. There are clear changes to his mechanics at the plate, and I think Jackson Holliday could have a huge year for the Orioles this year, so I think that's a good selection.
Thank you.
Leaves me in a spot where I pretty much have to take a starting pitcher with my next 2 picks because you could just totally box me out at the top 2 guys. So my first selection here is going to be Grayson Rodriguez. This is a bit of a gamble given the fact that we don't have a ton of information on him health-wise at this point, but I can't let you have Zach Eflin and Grayson Rodriguez at the top of your rotation, so I'm going to do the same thing I did last year and have Grayson as my top starting pitcher. I think I kind of have to at this point. After Grayson Rodriguez, there is a tier of hitter that are all really good. They quite literally had identical WARs last year, all at a 2.6. Of that group, looking at my needs here, I could go with Cedric Mullins, put him in center field, move Colton Cowser to a corner outfield. I could go with a corner outfielder. I could go with a first baseman. There are a couple of options here. And what I think I'm going to do, I know this leaves you with kind of an obvious selection, but I'm going to go with Tyler O'Neill.
Interesting.
We saw Tyler O'Neill put together just a heck of a season in Boston last year. It was an OPS of 847, 2.6 baseball reference WAR. I know that Tyler O'Neill has injury concerns. He played 113 games last year. If you get 100-plus games of Tyler O'Neill, I know he hasn't had back-to-back seasons of 100-plus games in his career yet, but if you get back-to-back good seasons from Tyler O'Neill, he has the potential to be maybe the best offensive player on this team if he stays healthy. And I think the Orioles will have a good approach with O'Neill. I would expect him to be a designated hitter plenty of times in this lineup. I expect Heston Kjerstad to platoon with O'Neill a good bit. If O'Neill can stay on the field, he is one of the best right-handed hitters in baseball. And so I'm going to take an upside swing, much like you have with Jackson Holliday and with Felix Bautista, and I'm going to take Tyler O'Neill, and I'm going to put him in right field, and I'm going to hope that we get 100, 115 games out of him, and that he produces the kind of offensive numbers that he did last year in Boston, where it was an OPS close to 850 and 30-plus home runs.
Yeah, I mean, if O'Neill stays healthy, grabbing him in the offseason is a major steal, and especially because he was brought in simply to mash lefties and fill in that corner outfield spot. He's a over 1,100 OPS last season against left-handed pitchers, so that is actually insane. So I think that he's a little early on, but I don't think that it's wrong to pick him there, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few guys that I had in that category. I know that you might just select the other 2 guys in that group for me that I had there, but that's the risk I'm going to run here in looking at the positional needs. I'd just love to add some more power on this team. I mean, I have power hitters in Gunnar Henderson and Colton Cowser already. Why not just keep it going with Tyler O'Neill?
Totally. Okay, so that brings me to my next two picks. And I think that what you were saying is you kind of have not gifted it to me, but you've led me into that direction. So I do need an outfielder, and I'm going to go with Cedric Mullins just because the impact that he's had in this clubhouse over the last few years during his career in that center field spot. 15.3 WAR career-wise with the Orioles, a .320 career on-base percentage, and .744 OPS as an Oriole. An .857 OPS in September and October last season, which are some good notes, just given the offensive production that he brought into this clubhouse late last season, especially when everyone else was slumping. The only player to get a run in the postseason last season.
Yeah,
so
that is unfortunately true.
And of course, his defense is just something that I want in my outfield. His speed, defense, just everything that I'm happy with getting him in my center field.
Yeah, I think that's the correct pick there. It was the other guy that I was considering between him and Tyler O'Neill, but I already had a good defensive center fielder in Colton Cowser, so a lot of the value that Cedric Mullins brings is his defense in center, and I felt like I already had that in Colton Cowser, but I think Cedric Mullins is absolutely the correct pick there.
All right, so then my next pick. This one's interesting because I could take someone that would clean up your outfield or that would fill up your outfield so that I have someone that you can't have in your outfield to finish it out. But I also have a lot of holes in my infield already. I am going to... Okay.
Decisions.
You have to fill some air right now while I think.
This is the benefit of me having a lot of fantasy drafts under my belt. And Annie, this is just your second fantasy draft. Your first 2025, 2024, whatever year it has been, just selecting that year of Orioles fantasy draft for you. So you have the benefit of at least having one fantasy draft, but this is a whole other animal.
Yeah, this
just
is
having
a whole
two
other
people
animal.
in the draft. What's the selection going to be?
Okay.
You're on the clock, Annie.
I think I have to grab another outfielder. I'm going to put Heston Kjerstad in there.
Okay.
And I'm going to put him at left field. This is another upside player because you pretty much don't have amazing numbers to base it off of in previous seasons. But in the last 14 games leading up to when he got knocked in the head by Clay Holmes last year, he had some really good numbers. I mean, an OPS over 1,100 in those 14 games, 378 batting average. This year in spring training, he's done pretty well with a 795 OPS. This is another upside player, and I'm willing to make that bargain because I think that he is probably the next best outfield option in the group that lies with the 40-man roster and beyond. Yeah,
I agree. I think if you didn't select Heston Kjerstad, then I probably would have selected Kjerstad with my next few picks here. I think Kjerstad, we'll see how many games he gets, but Mike Elias has said that he has earned big league at-bats. I think it's going to be a solid year from Heston Kjerstad. If everybody stays healthy in the outfield, then playing time might be scarce here or there, but he is certainly going to fill in some important spots, and so Heston Kjerstad, I think, is a good selection there. I'm going to draft two guys that oftentimes play the same position back-to-back here.
I know what you're going to do.
And I'm surprised that this first guy has fallen to this point, and that's Ryan Mountcastle. I had kind of penciled in that Ryan Mountcastle was going to your team. When I was talking about the decision I was making before, it was between Tyler O'Neill, Cedric Mullins, and Ryan Mountcastle. And I figured you would just go Mullins and Mountcastle back-to-back, which would have left me with Ryan O'Hearn and Heston Kjerstad, which I was fine with. But now I'm going to take both guys that usually play first base, and lucky for me, Ryan O'Hearn oftentimes will play a corner outfield.
That's so brutal for
I'm
me.
feeling pretty good about my position players here. Ryan Mountcastle has been having one heck of a spring. He is tearing the absolute cover off the ball. The wall in left field has moved back in, not specifically for him, but it kind of feels like it's for him. So I'm anticipating a great year out of Ryan Mountcastle. And then Ryan O'Hearn just consistently keeps chugging in an Orioles uniform. An OPS close to 800. He is a right-handed pitcher's worst nightmare. And I think he is at his best when the Orioles are able to use him in specific spots against right-handed pitching. Ryan O'Hearn has the talent to play most days, but the Orioles just have such a deep position player pool where they can utilize O'Hearn in just his best spots. So I'm pretty happy here taking Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn. Neither of us have dipped into the starting pitcher realm, kind of in the middle tier there with guys like Sugano and Morton and Kramer. I'm sure they will be coming off the board soon. But my outfield is now complete with throwing Ryan O'Hearn in left field, and my infield's coming along pretty nicely with Ryan Mountcastle, Jordan Westberg, and Gunnar Henderson. So I'm feeling pretty good there with those two picks.
Yeah, that's just pretty brutal for me. I'm starting to question all my life's decisions at this moment in time. Mountcastle was 100% going to be my next one, especially the numbers that he's put up this spring, the left field wall coming in this season, and that is just for sure brutal for me. But alas, I move on.
Annie, give us a quick rundown of your team here. As my infield, I'll recap mine real quick. Ryan Mountcastle at first base, Jordan Westberg and Gunnar Henderson on the left side of the infield. My outfield is complete with Ryan O'Hearn in left, Colton Cowser in center, Tyler O'Neill in right field. And I only have one pitcher so far. Nobody in my bullpen, but Grayson Rodriguez is my number one starter. These rosters, by the way, if you have tuned into fantasy drafts of the past, they are our typical rosters, which is a complete lineup, 8 position players plus 1 designated hitter, 4 starting pitchers, and 2 relievers. Annie, under your squad.
Okay, so I have at catcher, Adley Rutschman, second base, Jackson Holliday, left field, Heston Kjerstad, center field, Cedric Mullins. My starting pitcher, number 1, is Zach Eflin, and relief pitcher, number 1, is Felix Bautista. Definitely a lot of upside and kind of forecasting as opposed to using previous season's numbers, but that is okay, kind of. I'm going to continue, I guess, because I'm a little bit stuck, but I think for shortstop, no. Yes. No.
No. Yes. No. Yes. Maybe.
Yes. No. Okay. I'm going to go. Okay. I'm going to dip into the starting pitcher category again.
Okay.
I'm going to go with, I think that it's pretty even game for the rest of the starting pitchers a little bit. Like, I think it's pretty flat.
I think there's a group of 3 that you can choose from here that we pretty much know are going to be in the starting rotation to begin the season. And I would put those guys on a pretty similar tier of pretty darn good pitchers.
But I think that I'm going to continue with my elite command theme and go with Tomoyuki Sugano as my number 2. He has looked really good in spring. I know we can't put that much stock in those numbers again, but to get good signs from him coming over and throwing in a whole new league and see many scoreless innings from him is a really, really good sign. Plus that 2.6% walk rate in NPB, hoping that will translate over. So that is going to be my second starting pitcher.
Yeah, we have seen really, really good things from Sugano so far this spring. There aren't MLB numbers to base it on, so we have to put a bit more stock into the spring numbers for Sugano. The command has been off the charts excellent. The stuff is not overwhelming. It's not going to be a fastball that blows you away at 97, 98 miles an hour, but he is so precise that he has been able to get hitters out. We'll see how that translates into the regular season, but so far it is translating well to the Major League Baseball side of things.
And then I'm going to go ahead and grab Ramon Arias because I was between either Ramon Arias or Jorge Mateo because I did need a shortstop.
Are you going to put Arias at third base? His Gold Glove position?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I'm going to put Ramon Arias at third base because I like his offensive numbers better than Jorge Mateo, so I would be happier having Ramon Arias if you were to then grab Jorge Mateo at second base. But I think Arias is just a very, like I said before off the top, sneaky 9.1 WAR as an Oriole. Kept the offense afloat in many parts last season. And I think that what he's done so far as a Gold Glover in 2022 at that position, offensively, defensively, this is someone that I kind of need in my infield because it's lacking a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the correct decision there. Ramon Arias was unbelievable filling in for Jordan Westberg last season, and he is just he's just going to be solid every year. You know what you're going to get from Ramon Urias. It's going to be right around a league average OPS, solid defense at second base, great defense at third base where he won a Gold Glove a few seasons ago. So Ramon Urias, you could have put him anywhere. Second base, third base. He played shortstop a few years ago, so I would have allowed it if you wanted to put him there. But Ramon Urias really shores up your infield there alongside Jackson Holiday. I've got a few different ways that I can go here. We mentioned the group of 3 starting pitchers in Sugano, Morton, and Kramer that are kind of in that same tier. I could grab the remaining 2 guys there to fill out the rotation a little bit. I could grab none of them and just continue to go to the position player well. So I think what I'm going to do... I am thinking. What I am going to do is grab one of each. And I think where I'm going to start is with Charlie Morton.
Okay.
He is going to be my number 2 starting pitcher. And the reason that I go with Morton here, there's not a ton separating Sugano and Morton and Kramer. What separates Morton for me is just the consistency. 3 straight seasons starting at least 30 games. The Orioles have really been hit with injuries. Pitching injuries have been rampant across the game. Charlie Morton, despite being in his now age 41 season, just continues to post every 5th day. So if there is somebody here that I just know is going to start for me and is going to put up good numbers throughout the season, may not be elite numbers, but it's going to be Charlie Morton. So he is going to be my first selection here. And then I'm just really interested in finishing out my infield here, and it might not be with the player that you think I'm going to select.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to move Jordan Westberg to second base.
Okay.
And
no, don't do it.
Third base,
don't
I'm going to
do
select Kobe Mayo.
Oh, Brendan.
I know Kobe Mayo has been much the topic of conversation over the last few days.
I could throw my bobblehead at you right now.
Don't throw that cursed bobblehead at me. I don't need that Annie soccer bobblehead coming back to haunt me.
Ugh.
Kobe Mayo is a dude. He put up excellent offensive numbers at AAA Norfolk last year. I know there are some defensive question marks at third base and at first base. He is going to work on those things in Norfolk. He is going to get those things polished. Kobe Mayo was very honest about the move sending him back to AAA Norfolk.
Yeah.
And look, he was frustrated by that move. And I don't blame the guy for being a competitor. He wants to be at the big league level. He has shown a lot at AAA. Yeah, it's also true that there's not a lot of room for him at the big league level. Jordan Westberg and Ramon Urias at third base. Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn at first base. Heston Kjerstad you can throw into the conversation at designated hitter. Tyler O'Neill, Gary Sanchez. There are not a lot of at-bats to go around for Kobe Mayo. He has done a lot of good things, and I understand why he wants to be up here. His frustration and also the Orioles making the correct move, both of those things can be true.
Right.
There's just not a lot of playing time for him, but also he's done a lot. Kobe Mayo's time is coming at some point. He's still one of the best prospects in all of baseball. I think he is the first phone call if there is an injury,
100%.
if somebody is slumping, anything like that. Kobe Mayo is going to be ready to go. He's going to mash AAA pitching once again, and I'm excited to throw him in my infield here because I think we are going to see a different Kobe Mayo at the big leagues this year. It's a similar story to me to a guy like Colton Cowser. I know that Cowser ended up making the opening day roster the next year after struggling at the big leagues, and Mayo did not. But Kobe Mayo has seen big league pitching. He understands how major league pitchers are trying to attack him. I think it's going to be a big year. I think it's going to be a good year for Kobe Mayo.
No, I totally agree with both of those picks. I think Charlie Morton was 100%, in my opinion, to go before Dean Kramer just for that experience. I mean, not that Dean Kramer isn't experienced, but Charlie Morton, 2 World Series under his belt, 18 games in the postseason, and then not even those last 2 seasons of 30-plus consecutive or 30-plus starts, but 6 of his last 7 seasons have been 30-plus starts. So that consistency is huge to have in the Orioles rotation and also in your rotation. I'm really, really bummed about Kobe Mayo because I was going to put him at first base or even designated hitter, so that is really just tragic for me.
If you're off the Kobe Mayo train because of what happened yesterday with, his comments or his numbers in spring or whatever, I don't know what to tell you. Kobe Mayo is going to be a good Major League Baseball player.
Yeah, and the competition, the fire is there.
Yeah, good. We're going to get upset with him for being a competitor?
Right.
Yeah, good. He wanted to make the big league club.
Maybe not best publicity-wise, but I think when you know as a ball player that you got to have that fight, that dog in you, if you will.
Yeah.
But anyways, now that your infield is complete and your outfield, wow, I got a lot of gaping holes in this lineup, but that's okay.
Justin on YouTube commenting that, Annie, you should not let me get to you with my head games. Which
that is true.
I don't.
Because he got into me with his head game last draft because he said that longevity matters when I went and picked, who was it that I drafted when you said that?
They don't ask how I win the drafts. They just ask how many drafts I win.
It's because he gets in your head. You're right. But anyways, moving on. I could just take Gary Sanchez and leave you.
Oh, no, I would have to take Samuel Basallo. That's terrible. You can.
No, I'm not going to.
You could.
I'm not going to. I think because I would like to have Samuel Basallo as my designated hitter.
Wow.
And
okay.
I'm moving along with the upside train here, but because I don't think that when you take a look at full season contributions, Samuel Basallo probably won't be that guy because he probably won't be in this lineup at all or in the big leagues for quite some time into the season. But I also think that this guy can absolutely mash. His exit velocities are insane. He has been mashing in spring training. He definitely still has some reps to go in AAA Norfolk before making it to the big leagues. But I think with your options left and my options left, I think that he is a decent designated hitter to pick.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a true DH left outside of Gary Sanchez. You can't draft Gary Sanchez at this point because you have both a catcher and a designated hitter. So that leaves me the freedom to wait on Gary Sanchez for a while. But Samuel Basallo, there is a distinct possibility that Samuel Basallo lights the world on fire in AAA Norfolk for the first 2 months of the season, and then the Orioles just have to find a spot for him.
Yeah.
He was excellent in spring training. We still need to see it from Samuel Basallo at AAA. He got a cup of coffee there last year and didn't put up incredible offensive numbers, but there is absolutely a world where Basallo just mashes AAA pitching and then the Orioles go, okay, we have to find a spot for him somewhere. Yeah. So I don't know necessarily where the playing time is going to come for Basallo this season at the big league level, but it's entirely possible that he just forces the Orioles' hand.
Agreed. Okay, so now I'm going to wait for my infield because obviously you have yours filled up. So I'm going to go into the pitching again to try and box you out a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with I'm just going to pick up Dean Kramer as my third starting pitcher because that way I have 3 of the maybe top best starters in this rotation right now. I mean, Dean Kramer's a little bit different of a pitcher from Zach Eflin and Tomoyuki Sugano, but Kramer has been that guy, and he was pretty consistent last season in posting every 5th day, 500 career innings for this ball club, and I think that he has proved himself over the last few years that he belongs to be in that starting rotation. He's not necessarily one that knocks your socks off and is going to be anything more than a number 3 starting pitcher probably, but I think that the consistency he's brought is something that I can get on board with. Yeah,
it's been back-to-back, I think you could argue 3 straight seasons of just good production from Dean Kramer. And every once in a while, for Dean Kramer, as Orioles fans know, there will be a 7-inning, 9-strikeout, 1 walk, 1 earned gem from Kramer. He has that upside. He has that capability. So Dean Kramer, I think, is the correct pick there. I would have selected him on the turn if you didn't pick him. So Dean Kramer, I think, is a good move there. As I mentioned before, I don't have to draft Gary Sanchez at any point here soon. I can draft everybody else, and then Gary Sanchez can be my last pick, which I am totally fine with because I think Gary Sanchez probably plays 80-plus games this season, and he is going to be my starting catcher, and I feel great about that.
Yeah.
So the only things that I have to fill out are my DH spot 2 more starting pitchers and 2 relief pitchers because my infield outside of Gary Sanchez is done. My outfield is done. And I have my top 2 starters in Grayson Rodriguez and Charlie Morton. So that leaves me in a good spot where I think there are a few position players left that could fill a few different roles for me. There's only one left that we are anticipating to make the 40-man roster, and that's going to be my first selection, and that's going to be Ramon Laureano. I'm going to move Ryan O'Hearn to my designated hitter spot, and I'm going to put Laureano in left field, as he is probably a better defensive left fielder than O'Hearn, and O'Hearn is, with his offensive numbers, a natural DH. Ramon Laureano figures to be the 4th or 5th outfielder, however you want to have that split between him and Heston Kjerstad. Got off to a tough start to the season last year in 31 games with Cleveland, just a 494 OPS, but his second half of the year, 67 games with the Atlanta Braves, a 296 batting average, and 832 OPS. Laureano, again, I think the type of player that the Orioles can use in specific roles. He is excellent against left-handed pitching in his career, so I would anticipate seeing Laureano in center field plenty of times for Cedric Mullins to get guys off days when he is able to platoon and succeed. So I'm happy with Ramon Laureano filling out my outfield, and my position players are done because Gary Sanchez is going to be on my team at some point, and moving O'Hearn to my DH spot fills out the rest of my lineup. After Laureano, I could go to the starting pitching. Well, there are some other guys like Cade Povich, Albert Suarez that are possibilities there. But I think I'm going to go reliever. And I think there is one reliever that stands out among the rest of the group, and that's Yennier Cano.
Sure.
Back-to-back really good seasons out of Yennier Cano, was an all-star 2 seasons ago. You just kind of know what you're going to get from Cano. He may not be the closing option. I don't know if he is going to be the name that the Orioles turn to if Felix Bautista is not able to close a game. If there's a save situation in back-to-back nights, it might be Sir Anthony Dominguez or Gregory Soto. But Yennier Cano will come in the 7th, 8th inning and just give you really good production. So he's my pick there as my top reliever.
Yeah, I think 2 good picks. You taking Laureano makes it hard for me to vouch for my outfield a little bit, because then you have to go in and, for me, we'll get there. But for picking Yennier Cano, that's definitely the right pick. I think he is in that upper echelon of relievers in this bullpen for sure. Kind of right there with Bautista. That duo would have been great together, but I'm not going to fight you picking him. So I think 2 great picks there. And then I'll move on to mine, I guess, once you're done writing that, or I can just start talking about it. But so with you taking Yennier Cano, I'm going to go ahead and take another reliever.
Okay.
And I think going into the season, if you had not had the Andrew Kittredge injury, you would pick him.
Yes, Andrew Kittredge would be the guy here, I think, as well.
And that is something that's going to be tough to wrap your head around, because he is someone that you got in the offseason and you were looking forward to his elite chase rates, but he is not going to be present for at least a couple of months, which is too bad. But I'm going to go ahead and take Sir Anthony Dominguez because even though his numbers in spring training are fairly abysmal, we're not going to pay attention to that, because he did exactly what they needed of him last year after the trade deadline. Successfully came in and filled those holes from Craig Kimbrell, because he was not successfully closing at the time. And Sir Anthony Dominguez came in and filled that hole, recorded 10 saves as the closer last year. And I think that having Bautista and Dominguez together in my bullpen is really good, especially when you can have Dominguez as that closer on days that Bautista isn't going to be in, or have Dominguez as the setup man for Bautista.
Yeah, fairly abysmal for Sir Anthony Dominguez. The spring training numbers there, I think that's a fair classification. Not going to read too much into it. I think Sir Anthony Dominguez is going to have a good season. He was a solid pickup from Philly last year at the deadline. So I think he was the number 3 reliever here. You're right. If Kittredge was healthy, I think he's probably the pick. But Sir Anthony Dominguez right in that tier with Andrew Kittredge, and I think that's a good selection.
Thank you. And then obviously I'm not going to need to hit on my position players.
No, don't need to at all.
Because yours are filled out, so I'm going to grab another starting pitcher, and that's going to be Cade Povich. I think that he has really one of the best pitching stories in spring training so far. I mean, he just put up 5 hitless innings yesterday in the game. He has got a 3.29 ERA with 13 2/3 innings pitched in spring, 4 walks, 13 Ks, and a whip below 1,000. His command has been really good in this spring. So I'm going to put stock in his spring thus far. It is another upside pick, but he's more than likely going to get that 5th starting position spot come opening day. And when you look at his numbers in September of last year, going late down the stretch, he had a 2.60 ERA in those 5 starts with 32 strikeouts. So I'm happy with having Cade Povich and not letting you get him.
Yeah, I think that's good strategy there, given the fact that I am not going to select any position player that you are going to get here late in the draft. And so you draft the 2 positions in starting pitcher and relief pitcher that I still needed. So it's kind of funny where we have gotten in this draft. The strategy is totally gone because I am pretty much done with position players outside of Gary Sanchez. You can't draft Gary Sanchez, so I can wait on him forever. You are done with relief pitchers. I need a relief pitcher. It doesn't matter when I select one. You are done with starting pitchers. I need 2 starting pitchers. It doesn't matter when you select one.
It's
so
not
the
even
strategy
like
is completely done.
We didn't even intend to do that where
No.
you would fill, because you even brought it off the top. Or brought it up off the top as saying like, well, I could get all my position players and you could get all your
right.
pitchers.
But that's the way it is panned out here. Your pitching is completely done. Eflin, Sugano, Kramer, Povich in your rotation, Bautista, and Dominguez in your bullpen. And I'm just left with Grayson Rodriguez and Charlie Morton as my starters and Yennier Cano in my bullpen. It doesn't matter when I select any of my remaining players because you won't draft Gary Sanchez, you won't draft any starters, and you won't draft any relievers. So I can really pick these guys in any order that I feel like.
Yeah,
so
we could just put them all up on the board.
In theory, we could because we are already long on our podcast today. We are. This is going to be a long episode, so hoping that you are tuned in for the long haul here. But, I'm just going to select guys in order that I had them on my big board, I suppose. And I'll start with Gary Sanchez. I don't think your Samuel Basallo selection was bad by any means, but if we want to talk about a catcher that has guaranteed playing time to start the season, it is Gary Sanchez. He is a really, really solid backup, put up good offensive numbers, is, again, a really good hitter as a backup catcher, which is kind of hard to find around the league. Most backup catchers are just guys that work with pitchers well, but Gary Sanchez has the capability of putting up solid offensive numbers, so he will be my catcher, and I'm very happy with how my position players have strung up here. And then after that, I guess, again, I'll just go with the next highest guy on my big board, which is Albert Suarez, and I am going to select Suarez as a starting pitcher. Mm-hmm. I know there is some debate as to whether or not Suarez will be a starter or a reliever come opening day. It is entirely possible that he is in the bullpen, but it's also entirely possible that he wins the 5th starter spot over Cade Povich. So Suarez as my number 3 pitcher here, I'm happy with. And I'm happy that those 2 selections have fallen to me given how the board has shaken out.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, as Justin Berlin commented on YouTube, I could have taken Gary Sanchez ahead of time and put him as DH and then moved Samuel Basallo at first base. That could have been good, and I could have put you in a pickle for your catching options.
I didn't even think about that.
I also didn't even think about that.
You could have put Gary Sanchez at first base. He played a lot of first base last year.
That is true, but I could move. He was saying I could move Basallo at first.
Yeah, you could have put either of those guys at first. So I was too lackadaisical with Gary Sanchez.
Yeah,
or was I? Head game.
Yeah, see? But I also like Justin's comment saying, can we get an Annie bobblehead promo game? I think it's time. I'm loving that comment. That's the best comment I've received.
That is possibly the worst comment we've received on YouTube.
No, don't listen to him. It's a head game. He's getting in your head.
That bobblehead is terrifying. You haven't looked at this bobblehead in the eyes.
I need to give a close-up.
We should have a...
No, we don't have enough time for a close-up.
Walk up to the camera,
another time.
I think our entire viewership would, I don't know, a curse upon their family for the next 3 centuries. That bobblehead is terrifying. You haven't looked it in the eyes.
And then, so I get 2 picks. I'm going to go, and like you mentioned, it doesn't matter really who I pick and in what order, but I'm going to go with Jorge Mateo at shortstop. I think that given his health is at full peak or full potential, that he would be the backup shortstop anyways behind Gunnar Henderson. You could argue that Jackson Holliday is going to get some reps at shortstop if Gunnar isn't full go from the start of the season. But if Mateo is also full go, he would get that nod for backup shortstop.
Annie, for the sake of time, just make your next 2 selections because I cannot draft a position player. So who you draft here makes no difference in who I will draft for my next 2 selections.
So right field, I'm going to go Dylan Carlson. I think that he is the 5th outfield contender. And he has been doing pretty well in spring so far. 320 batting average, OPS over 1,000, 2 home runs, 8 RBIs. Finished 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting in 2021 with the Cardinals. So let's get back
One
to
spot behind Trevor Rogers.
Yeah, very true.
Second for the Marlins.
You should draft Trevor Rogers next.
I certainly could. Certainly a possibility for my 4th starting pitcher.
And then for my first base option, I suppose I'm going to go Emmanuel Rivera.
Okay.
I think.
I mean, there are other options too. You could move Samuel Basallo to first base if there was a different position player you wanted to put at designated hitter.
That's true.
So
but
the board
really
is pretty
someone
open.
That pops out as a designated hitter that's left? Not really. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab Emmanuel Rivera. Put on some numbers last year and filled some spots that were needed when there were lots of injuries in the infield. So did a decent job filling in those shoes last season, batting 300 right now in spring training and 890 OPS. I think that he's probably the only other viable option to put in at first base, especially because you took both Ryans, which is really unfortunate.
I sure did.
And definitely a draft strategy that beat me. So
I have a monopoly on the Ryans.
You do have a monopoly on the Ryans.
Yeah.
And the O apostrophes. You have the
and the O apostrophes. That was the draft strategy coming in.
Strategy.
Was draft the Ryans and draft the O apostrophes. I just need my 4th starting pitcher and my 2nd reliever. I think the 2nd reliever is an easier pick than the last starter, so I'm going to make that one first, and it's going to be Gregory Soto. Again, we have talked about Soto a lot this offseason, and if you take out his first 3 starts in an Orioles uniform where he was fresh off a trade and was adjusting to Baltimore's clubhouse, the ERA was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Gregory Soto, a multiple-time All-Star, has a ton of upside. I think he is maybe the highest upside lefty in this bullpen. So Gregory Soto, an easy pick for me with my 2nd reliever spot. The 4th starting pitcher is interesting for me.
It sure is.
There are a bunch of options here. You mentioned Trevor Rogers, who I think if he wasn't injured in spring training would probably be my selection here. I think the same can be said for Chase McDermott, who, again, if he wasn't injured in spring training, it would be easier to look at him and say, hey, he's in this starting rotation conversation. I could take Zach Fruit, which would be a heck of a pick considering that he is a reliever and he is not close to the big leagues.
Throw him in there anyways.
It's certainly an option. There are a lot of guys where the injury status is unknown, and we don't know what we're going to get from them. And so I'm going to draft a pitcher whose injury status is unknown, and we don't know what we're going to get from him. But when he is back, he has the potential to be the best pitcher on this team, and that's Kyle Bradish.
Yeah.
I know
100%.
that we may not see him for a while, and I also know the risk that if Kyle Bradish comes back, he may not even start games. He may be a reliever for this team going into the playoffs. But if Kyle Bradish comes back ahead of schedule, if there is a month and a half of Kyle Bradish, he could be the best pitcher on this team. I understand that he is coming back from a major elbow surgery, and so we don't know exactly what we are going to get from him. But as my 4th starter here, I think I'm willing to take the risk given some of the other guys that are on the board. If Kyle Bradish comes back and he is Kyle Bradish, then even a few weeks of his production is a few weeks of a really good starting pitcher.
Yeah, I think both of those are definitely the correct moves for the right spots. I mean, Gregory Soto last September, a 2 flat ERA with 11 strikeouts, so he definitely came back and proved himself after some streaky innings that he put on after the trade deadline. And then Kyle Bradish, it is kind of crazy to think that he is the last pick for you of the draft because of how dominant he was when he was healthy. And I think that he 100% should have gone over Trevor Rogers, Chase McDermott. It's a little bit maybe similar. You could make the comparison with me picking Samuel Basallo, where you think that he's going to be a big contribution when he's there, but it probably won't be till later in the season. And I think you could say the same about Kyle Bradish.
Yeah, you don't know when he is going to get to the big leagues, but if he is in the big leagues for a month or two, that's probably a really good player at the major league level. So I think those are similar cases there. All right, Annie, we have fantasy drafted, I would say, two pretty good teams here from our projections of the Orioles 2025 season. Some guys that were not selected that were still good options. We mentioned Trevor Rogers and Chase McDermott. Tyler Wells could come back at some point later in this season as well. Really no prospects outside of Samuel Basallo and Kobe Mayo, who are both knocking on the door at the big league level. Could have maybe selected somebody like Enrique Bradfield Jr. if you believe that he is going to be up at the big league level at some point this season. Dylan Beavers and Judd Fabian have both put together nice springs.
Judson Fabian, I just discovered that
Judson
is his
Fabian.
full name.
They are both at the AAA level. Some other depth infield guys like Levon Soto, Taron Vavra were options at AAA as well, but I think it speaks to the depth of this team that we are able to make two rosters of pretty good teams here that I think would win a lot of games. So to wrap things up here, Annie, our lengthy 2025 Orioles draft podcast here, let's run through our teams. Annie, we'll start with you.
Okay, so my first pick for my team was Adley Rutschman. And then at first base, I have Manuel Rivera. Second base, Jackson Holliday. Third base, Ramon Arias. Shortstop, Jorge Mateo. Left field, Heston Kjerstad. Center field, Cedric Mullins. Right field, Dylan Carlson. Designated hitter, Samuel Basallo. Starting pitcher number 1, Zach Eflin. Then Tomoyuki Sugano. Dean Kramer, Cade Povich. Reliever number 1, Felix Bautista. And reliever number 2, Sir Anthony Dominguez.
Yeah, my first overall pick here, I had the first pick in the draft, and I selected Gunnar Henderson at shortstop. Elsewhere in the infield, I've got Gary Sanchez behind the dish, Ryan Mountcastle at first, Jordan Westberg at second, and Kobe Mayo at the hot corner. In the outfield, Ramon Laureano in left, Colton Cowser in center, Tyler O'Neill in right field. Ryan O'Hearn is my designated hitter. My starting rotation is Grayson Rodriguez, Charlie Morton, Albert Suarez, and Kyle Bradish. And my relievers are Yennier Cano and Gregory Soto. This isn't going to be a fan vote like drafts in the past where you will decide who the best team is. We're going to see who the best team is throughout the season. But, Annie, I think you have the edge in the starting rotation with Eflin, Sugano, Kramer, and Povich, where I have some upside plays in Suarez, who might be in the bullpen, and Kyle Bradish, who might come back healthy at some point, hopefully in the latter half of 2025. I think you have the edge in the bullpen as well, where Felix Bautista pitches like Felix Bautista. He is going to give you the advantage in the bullpen by himself. I think position player-wise,
you definitely
I've got you beat on the lineup.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of all-stars in the infield in Jordan Westberg and Gunnar Henderson. Ryan Mountcastle looks like he is primed for a big season with some of his results this spring. And then in the outfield, a couple of all-star caliber players in Colton Cowser and Tyler O'Neill, Ramon Laureano, a seasoned veteran who can play anywhere in the outfield. And then Ryan O'Hearn just chugging at DH. So I think our strengths are in very different places in this draft, but I think we've built two solid squads. But I think that'll just about do it for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest. Thank you for commenting along with us live, even if you were yelling at me for having head games and trying to get in Annie's head here
thanks for
in our fantasy draft. Annie, thanks you for your support. I am mad at you for your hate, but that's okay. That's what fuels me. The haters keep me going. That was a terrible thing to say. We hope you followed along with us live on YouTube and Facebook. We are live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on those two platforms. Or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. We are just 8 days away from opening day. Our next podcast is going to be our 2025 preview show where we will make season predictions. We will hand out team awards. And then the next day is going to be opening day. So stick with us for all of our coverage here on our MASN Orioles social platforms. We are so excited that baseball is just around the corner. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Klaff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.